Twitter by Scott Bernhardt. What's a tweet? 140 characters of change the world, build a business, have fun, says Evan Williams, co-founder of Twitter. How Twitter can help you become the next president of the United States. Social media tools such as Twitter, Facebook have been hailed as politically disruptive communication technologies, properly understood and appreciated only in comparison to the most politically significant technological innovations of the 20th century, such as radio and television. So how candidates view Twitter. In a very short space of time, approximately 2 years, politicians in modern democracies have eagerly adopted social networking tools such as Facebook and Twitter, seeing a powerful way to engage their constituents and have an open dialogue and an interactive experience online. So how Twitter has been utilized. At the height of Barack Obama's presidential campaign, he employed over 100 staff to work in his social media outreach alone, including his Twitter account. So Barack tweeted 4 more years after winning the election in 2012. So his one tweet, 16 characters, a photograph retweeted in more than 200 nations, reaching more than 25 million people on Twitter. This is how President Barack Obama's re-election campaign claimed victory in 2012. With it came close to an election in which millions of Americans turned to Twitter to voice their views, debate the issues, and connect with the candidates like never before. The Twitter election introduced voters to a new real-time soundtrack for the campaign, and journalists a new way of reporting, bringing voters virtually on board. So a study that was conducted on Twitter and candidates by Hong and Nadler, 2012, the study examined if U.S. presidential candidates' Twitter activities are associated with the number of Twitter mentions they receive, and if so, to what extent. Taken all together, we found little evidence to suggest that candidates' Twitter activities have a significant impact on the number of mentions about them on Twitter. The study also found strong evidence positively linking the number of times a politician is mentioned by popular traditional media with the number of mentions he or she gets on Twitter. On average, a 10% increase in the number of media mentions for a politician is associated with a 4 to 6% increase in the number of Twitter mentions. So how Twitter is portrayed through other media. Politicians who have the capacity to attract more attention on Twitter tend to use Twitter more intensively in general, or that they tend to use Twitter much more intensively on a day where they're expected to be discussed. So in the case of like the Iowa caucuses or election days, some of the bigger campaigning days, they'll expect it to be mentioned more through other forms of media. So again, a politician's Twitter activities may themselves affect the number of times a politician is mentioned by the selected mass media. This positive association implies that some journalists may take cues from the politician's tweets when they decide to mention a politician in their news article. That is, a politician's Twitter activities may influence how journalists frame their news articles. So I think we've seen this a lot in regards to Trump with some of the off-the-wall tweets that he mentions. He has gotten increased media exposure on TV, radio, and print because of this. And if this is true, then at least part of the significant impact of media mentions on candidate salience could be attributable to politicians' Twitter activities. Thank you for listening. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. politically incorrect. We wouldn't have it any other way.